Parte 1. The rules. When the auction listing went up, I thought it was a scam. A cabin in the Smoky Mountains, fully furnished, electricity, water, landline connection, no neighbors within 5 miles, listed at $14,000, no reserve. The photos were grainy and low resolution, but the place looked real. Small, but not run down. Rustic, but solid. A-frame construction, 1 bedroom, big stone fireplace, and a porch that overlooked a clearing with trees that looked ancient. The listing said, as is, no inspections, quick sale preferred. I'd been looking for a way out for months. After the divorce, after I quit my job, after I watched my father die slowly in a hospice bed without recognizing me, I needed something different. Not healing, just space, distance. So I placed a bid, and I won. No one else even tried. That should have been the first red flag. The road to the cabin was barely a road, 2 hours south from Knoxville. Then another 45 minutes of climbing into the Smokies on a dirt trail that would kill a normal car's suspension. I drove a borrowed Subaru that smelled like a golden retriever and desperation. By the time I arrived, dusk was settling in. The air was cool, quiet, pine and old soil. The kind of silence you don't get near civilization. The cabin stood just as the photos had shown. A-frame faded red, moss along the roof shingles, chimney leaning just a little left. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was cold but dry, clean in a way that made me uncomfortable. Not fresh, but preserved. Like no one had touched it in years, but someone had always been looking after it. The furniture was dated. A green plaid couch, a leather armchair with cracked arms, a tiny dining table with only 1 chair. The kitchen had cabinets with peeling white paint and a fridge from the 1980s, humming gently. I walked through the place slowly. No animals. No dust. Just still. That's when I saw the notebook. It was on the kitchen table, next to an empty coffee cup. Black cover, spiral bound, labeled in red marker, rules, read before nightfall. I opened it. The handwriting was neat, firm, like someone had written it slowly, carefully, with intention. The paper smelled like smoke and something older, like old pine resin or dried blood. It read, 1. Lock the front door before sunset. Deadbolt and chain. 2. Close all windows by 7 p.m., even in summer. 3. Do not answer voices from outside, no matter what they say. 4. If you hear scratching from the roof, do not investigate. 5. If the power flickers 3 times in a row, turn off all lights. Wait in the dark. 6. Do not open the basement door after midnight, even if you hear knocking. 7. This line had been blacked out entirely, just a thick, angry line of ink, like someone had scribbled it out over and over. 8. Never sleep in the bedroom on the left. If the wind stops suddenly, get under the table and do not move. 10. If something knocks twice on the back wall, knock back only once. 11. Never ever dig in the garden. 12. If the trees start creaking during a calm night, go outside and whistle once. Then come back in and wait. 13. Don't talk to the reflection if it speaks. 14. You can stay safe here, but only if you follow the rules. At first, I thought it was a joke, some kind of backwoods prank, like a weird version of those haunted house Airbnbs people made for TikTok. But the notebook was old. The pages yellowed at the edges. The black ink faded in places. And rule number 7? The way it was crossed out made my chest tighten, like it wasn't meant to be unread, but unrevealed. I sat on the couch with the notebook in my hands until the shadows in the room got long and sharp. I didn't realize the sun had dropped behind the trees until the cabin dimmed in a way that felt sudden. I looked at the clock above the kitchen sink. 6:53 p.m. I stood up fast, locked the front door, deadbolt, chain, closed every window. There were 4, 1 in the kitchen, 2 in the living room, 1 in the bathroom. The bedroom on the left had no windows. The other bedroom, the one with the smaller bed and a lamp shaped like a bear, had 1 small window facing the back of the cabin. I closed that too. By 7 p.m., I was sitting on the couch, all the rules followed, listening to the sounds of the forest as night took over. It was quiet, really quiet, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. No crickets, no wind, not even the buzz of the fridge anymore. I sat there for a long time. Around 8:30 p.m., the power flickered. Once, twice, then a third time. Click, click, click. Then it went out. I froze, waited. It came back on 4 seconds later. The fridge humming again. Lights normal. But I remembered the rule. If the power flickers 3 times in a row, turn off all lights, wait in the dark. I stood, flicked off the kitchen switch, turned off the lamp. The cabin plunged into darkness. I waited, heart hammering. No sounds, no movement. Just me in a pitch-black room, notebook clutched in one hand. Then I heard it. A soft creak on the porch. Just one. Like a footstep. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then a voice. Female. Young. Tired. Hello? It sounded like it was right outside the door. Please, can I come in? My throat closed. I stayed still. You forgot to close the bathroom window. No, I hadn't. I'm already inside. The voice came from behind me. I turned. Darkness. Nothing. I ran to the wall, flicked the lights back on. Everything normal. Bathroom window shut. Front door locked. No one there. But on the notebook, now open again on the table, something new was written in handwriting that wasn't mine. Rule 7 still applies. You just don't get to know it. Parte 2, the voice behind the door. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I sat on the couch until sunrise. All the lights on, every window double-checked, the door still chained and locked. Every hour or so, I'd stand up, walk the perimeter, and check the windows again. Just in case, just to see if the shadows had shifted. But nothing moved, nothing knocked. And when daylight finally cracked the treetops and slid golden over the porch, I let myself breathe again. It felt like the house was holding back, waiting. I made coffee and sat at the table staring at the notebook. The handwriting hadn't changed. That last sentence, Rule 7 still applies, you just don't get to know it, was real. Still there, still dark. The ink smudged slightly like it had been written fast. I thought about throwing it away, but something stopped me. Because whatever this was, whether a prank, a mental breakdown, or something stranger, it was serious, real, tangible, and I hadn't followed all the rules. I hadn't turned off the fridge. That counted, didn't it? I wondered what might have happened if I hadn't turned the lights off at all. If I'd ignored the 3 flickers, or worse, if I'd answered the voice. I spent the rest of the morning walking the property. The trees were tall, thick, older than I'd guessed. No trails, no signs of animals, no trash, no birdsong, just wind. I found the garden behind the cabin around noon. It was small, fenced in by old wooden stakes and string. Overgrown now, twisting roots, tall stalks, ivy like black veins. I remembered Rule 11, never ever dig in the garden. I didn't, but I crouched beside the fence and looked. In the dirt, half buried, was something round and pale. At first I thought it was a rock. Then I realized it was smooth, porcelain. I didn't touch it. Not that day, not yet. That night, I followed every rule to the letter. Door locked by 6:45 p.m. Windows sealed. Lights out at 9 p.m. And I kept the notebook in my lap like a shield. The power didn't flicker. No voices called. Nothing knocked. But at 2:17 a.m., 4 minutes after Rule 3's danger window, I heard it, breathing, from the left bedroom, the one I wasn't supposed to enter. It was subtle at first, soft, slow, like someone asleep. I froze, waited. It continued for over an hour, never faster, never louder, just steady, raspy exhalations through wood and drywall. And then it stopped, all at once, like whoever or whatever was in there had been holding their breath and suddenly exhaled everything at once. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, I opened the bedroom door. Sunlight spilled in from the small crack in the bathroom window. Dust in the air like fog. The bed was made perfectly. The floorboards clean. The closet door half open. I closed it fully, then opened it again. Nothing inside. No shoes, no coats, just an empty bar and 2 wire hangers. But on the underside of the top shelf, carved into the wood in rough, jagged letters, "Don't listen too long." That afternoon, I went into town. There was a diner down in the valley, about 40 minutes away, that served burnt coffee and thick omelets and didn't ask questions. I talked to the waitress, Linda, gray hair, hands like paper. She'd been in the area 30 years. "Know anything about that cabin off Granger Trail?" I asked. She blinked, paused, then set down the coffee pot and said, "Which one? The old Allen place?" "Maybe. Red A-frame." I nodded. She exhaled. "You bought it?" I nodded again. "You read the rules yet?" That stopped me cold. She nodded to herself, almost sadly. "My brother stayed there a few nights, back in '04, came back shaking, never spoke right again." "What happened?" I asked. She looked at me, dead center. "He opened the bedroom door. The left one. That's where they sleep." "They?" I asked. She didn't answer, just walked away. That night, I bolted the door by 6:30, lit a fire, sat with the notebook open, waiting. At 10:12 p.m., the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. I turned them all off, sat in the dark, again, and this time, something moved in the attic. Slow steps, one at a time. Then silence. Then, a single knock on the wall. Back wall. Rule 10. If something knocks twice on the back wall, knock back only once. But it had only knocked once. I stayed still. Then another knock. Slower. Heavier. 2. I waited, heart racing. Then lifted my hand and knocked once in reply. Silence. Then footsteps, overhead, walking away. Parte 3. Under the floor. The next morning, I found a handprint on the inside of the back door. It was faint, smudged in dust, but unmistakable. 5 long fingers, too long, and wide, like they belonged to someone wearing gloves they'd outgrown. It was just above the deadbolt, but the chain was still latched. There was no sign of forced entry. I opened the door slowly and looked outside. The porch was normal. Pine needles in the corners, a dead moth under the light fixture. But when I looked closer, I saw tracks. Not footprints, just indents. Wide, deep, as if something had leaned its full weight there for a long time. Watching, waiting. I stayed out of the cabin most of the day, took a chair into the clearing and sat in the sun with a thermos of coffee and the notebook in my lap. I reread it again and again. The crossed-out Rule 7 haunted me, not just because I didn't know what it was, but because I'd started to feel like something inside the cabin did, something that remembered it, like the cabin itself had rules, like the rules weren't just to protect me, but to contain something else. I looked at Rule 11 again. Never, ever dig in the garden. Around 3 p.m., I went to the shed. There was a shovel, old, rusted, handle worn to bare wood. I stood at the edge of the garden for a long time, then stepped inside. I told myself I wouldn't dig deep. Just a test, just a scratch of the surface. The soil was dense, dry. I dug slowly, then hit something solid. It wasn't a root, not rock. I knelt, brushed away the earth. It was ceramic, a mask, white, blank, no eyes, just a single vertical slit down the center where the mouth would be. I touched it. It was warm. I stood fast, reburied it, walked away, didn't look back. That night, the power didn't flicker, but the scratching started around midnight. Not on the roof this time, from under the floorboards, right beneath the couch. It wasn't frantic. It was rhythmic, almost like tapping. I stood, walked to the center of the room, sat down on the floor and pressed my palm against the boards. Cold. Then the tapping stopped, and I felt a breath, hot and slow, rise between the planks. I backed away, slept in the car that night. In the morning, I found a new message in the notebook. Different handwriting, tiny, slanted, in the margin beside Rule 7. You've already broken it. Part 4, Things with No Faces. I didn't go back inside right away. I sat on the porch for an hour, trying to slow my breathing, trying to think. What rule had I broken? Digging? Listening? Was Rule 7 the one about the garden? About the basement? No. Those had their own numbers. So what had I triggered? I opened the notebook again and traced the black line over Rule 7 with my finger. It looked angry now, raw, like it had been drawn with fury, not secrecy, like someone had tried to erase the idea of the rule itself. That night, I stayed awake in the car again, engine off. Windows cracked just a little. The forest was quiet, but not empty. At 2:13 a.m., something moved across the yard. A shape, tall, wide, not walking, gliding. Its legs moved, but not like legs, like joints that bent the wrong way. It passed the porch, then paused at the door. I held my breath. It turned, faceless, but somehow looking straight at me, then kept going, into the trees, and disappeared. The next day, I went into town. The diner was closed, but the library was open. I asked the man behind the desk about property records. He was reluctant at first, then curious. He helped me search through old files, paper folders from the 1970s, 60s, 50s. The cabin had been listed 5 times in 40 years. Each time, it sold once. Each time, The owner vanished within 6 months. Only once had a body been found. A man in 1998, discovered in the woods, 20 feet from the back door. No injuries, no signs of struggle. Eyes open, mouth stretched wide like he was still screaming. The file photo was black and white and grainy, but I recognized the shirt. It was hanging in the left bedroom closet. I left the library shaking. Back at the cabin, the door was open, just slightly, the chain still on, but the deadbolt turned. I hadn't unlocked it, and the fire I'd built that morning was cold. Inside, everything looked normal, except the notebook. It was open, pages flipped to a blank section near the back. One new sentence written dead center. They come through the rules. That night, I didn't turn off the lights. I wanted to see them, whatever they were. I wanted to know. At 3:14 a.m., the power went out completely. No flicker, just silence. The cabin swallowed in black, and then the mirror in the bathroom started glowing. Not with light, with reflection. My reflection, but not my face. Different mouth, different eyes. It smiled and whispered, "You see it now." Then the sound of footsteps from the left bedroom. I don't remember grabbing the axe. I only remember standing in the hallway, facing the door. It opened slowly. No wind, no breath, just creaking wood and cold air. Inside, darkness and breathing. Then, whispers. "You broke Rule 7, Parte 5, the unwritten rule." It didn't enter the bedroom. I couldn't. The door stood open, a black rectangle eating the hallway, and from within it came a sound that didn't belong to this world. A low hum, like electricity stretched across bone. It moved in waves, pulsing through my ribs. Behind it, whispering. Dozens of voices layered on top of each other, all speaking the same sentence out of sync. He shouldn't have opened it. Shouldn't have opened it. The axe in my hand felt like a toy. Whatever was inside that room didn't fear me. It had been waiting. And now that I'd acknowledged it, it had permission. Because that's what Rule 7 was about, wasn't it? Permission. It wasn't just a rule to follow. It was a line not to cross, and I'd crossed it without knowing. By reading too closely, by breaking patterns, by listening too long, I stepped back, closed the door slowly, and something pressed against the other side. Not hard, just present, like a hand, like a face, testing the wood between us. That morning, I packed. I told myself I'd leave, walk the 15 miles to the ranger station if I had to, abandon the car, let the place rot. But when I stepped outside, the forest was wrong, brighter than it should be. No breeze. The trees swayed in opposite directions, and the trail down the mountain? Gone. Just thick brush where it used to be. No tire tracks, no sign of road. The land had changed while I slept, or while I was awake. Back inside, the cabin felt tighter, like the walls had moved closer. The air buzzed faintly, like I was inside a television stuck between channels. The notebook lay open again, this time to the very last page, and written there in enormous block letters, "The rules were never yours. They were theirs." And underneath, smaller, "You made them forget. That's why they remember you." I locked every door, barricaded every window, lit the fireplace, and sat with the axe across my lap. But I knew it wouldn't matter, because the rules weren't protections, they were bindings, and I had loosened one. Rule 7 wasn't missing. It had been sealed. And now that I'd broken it, something else was free. At midnight, the scratching began again. this time from inside the walls, then the ceiling, then the floor, every direction at once. I held the axe tight, the lights flickered, then went out, and in the darkness, I heard the mirror whisper, "We want you to see." Part 6. Through the rule. I don't remember standing. I don't remember dropping the axe. All I remember is the sound of my own name, spoken not aloud, but inside my skull, like an echo trapped in bone, over and over. Elliot, 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 but no one here knew my name. I hadn't told anyone, not the cellar, not the town, not the woman in the diner. Only the rules knew me now, only the cabin. The walls groaned, the floor rippled beneath my feet. I moved without thought, drawn down the hallway, toward the left bedroom, the forbidden room. The door stood open, breathing softly. I stepped inside. It was empty, no bed, just black, a void that pulsed like a lung. Floating in the air before me was the notebook, pages fluttering, turning on their own. And in the center of the room, if it could be called a room, was the rule. Rule 7. No longer crossed out, just written, clear, clean, burned into the air. If you read this, you're already part of it. Then I saw them, shapes, not human, but wearing memory like clothing. One looked like my father, another like my ex-wife, another was me, all wrong, eyes too wide, mouths unmoving, all watching, all whispering. You read it. You opened the door. You are the door. And then, you are what comes next. I ran, or tried to, but the room didn't have a floor anymore. Just spinning light, rules spiraling like a galaxy. I fell, and fell, and fell. I woke up in the cabin. Morning, sunlight, everything normal. The fire was out, the notebook gone, the door locked, the windows shut. No sound, just birdsong. I stood slowly, checked my body. Same clothes, same skin. But something felt off. Lighter, or hollow. Like something inside me had been removed and replaced. I drove to town. The road was there again, trees normal, sky blue. At the diner, Linda didn't recognize me. At the library, my name didn't appear in the property records. Not mine, not anyone's. The cabin had no owner now, no record. Like I had never been. I drove back anyway, stood on the porch at dusk, waited. And when the shadows grew long and sharp, I picked up the pen, opened a new notebook, wrote 1. Lock the door before sunset. 2. Close the windows. 3. Don't answer the voices. 4. Crossed out with a thick black line. 5. Don't sleep in the left room. 6. Follow the rules. And underneath I wrote, he stayed too long. Then I placed the notebook on the table and waited for the next one to find it. The end.